Hi, I'm going to show you how to make some grass and put it into CryEngine. So to start with, I've got a photo that I've taken of some grass, and the first thing I need to do is to cut this out. So the way that I would normally do this is with the polygon lasso tool. You can try using like the magic wand and stuff, or you can just use an eraser and go around. I kind of find this is the easiest way to do it. So all I need to do is cut out these pieces of grass. I'm just going to do this quickly and then I'll show the kind of finished one. So obviously do this a lot neater than I'm doing it here. But yeah, I'm just going to cut out that whole thing. Like so. And once I've done, I can just right click on that and do a new layer via cut or copy. So then I'll just have this cut out. Okay, so this is that once all those pieces are cut out. And what I'm going to do is just move these off into a corner. And then I want to start to make my texture page, so I need to make sure that my canvas is in a power of 2. So I'm going to make this 2048 by 2048, like that. And now I want to start arranging these into some little kind of clumps. So I'd probably put 2 or 3 of these onto a texture page, and that way you can add a bit of sort of variety into what you're doing. So if I just start to arrange these like this. And then I can just hold Alt and copy one over, and I can flip that round, maybe scale it, rotate it, and get a bit of variation. So I can make one little patch there, and then another little patch. I'll make a kind of a big, long piece of grass that we can get quite a lot out of here. And I'll put another one up here in this corner as well. Okay, so this is the result of that, and I've just put all of these into a group as well. So the other thing that I should point out is that I've left these so that they're kind of in their own square and nothing's going to overlap. So if I move this across there, you can see I'll be able to cut this just down here, and none of the grass from the other parts will overlap. And the same there. So I can cut out a little square here just for this patch, and a little square here just for this patch, and then a square sort of there for this patch. So I've put all those into a group, and I'm just going to I'll duplicate that group and merge that. Okay. And actually I'm just going to scale this part up a tiny bit to make slightly better use, or make sort of full use of my texture page. So this might as well come all the way to these edges, and I just get the maximum texture resolution. Just like that group. Right, so next thing I'll do is create my alpha. So to create the alpha channel, I'm just going to grab a selection from this, so just control and click on that little thumbnail image, and you'll get these marching ants around your selection. And go to channels, add a new channel, and then you just need to fill this with white. So I'll just get a brush and fill that in like that. So make sure this is kind of solid white. That's fine. Okay, and now we just need to pad this. So to pad it, I'm just going to add a new layer and then filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I'll do that about 10 pixels maybe. So that'll make this kind of blurry image, and then if I just duplicate that a whole load of times, like that, and I'll merge all of those together. And I'll do the same thing again, so I'll duplicate that one, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. This time I'll just do a massive blur on this, so maybe 300 pixels, and then just duplicate that a load of times as well. And then finally I'll just stick a layer underneath and fill that with a green colour, like that. Okay, so now if we get any texture bleeding, when our texture starts to map around these edges, the colour that bleeds in will kind of match the colour that was that's around those edges. So I can save that, and now I just want to save this as a CryEngine file. So file, save as, make a new folder for this. CryEngine. Save it as a CryEngine plugin, and I'll call this Grass 3, because I've already done this a few times. So Grass 3 diffuse, save, and I'll save this as a high quality diffuse. I can probably get away quite comfortably with this being 1K texture, and we want to make sure that we've got RGB and alpha coming out of this so that we get our transparency. So save that, and then let's open up Max. Okay, so inside 3ds Max I can just make a plane, and I'll make this, I'll make it a meter by meter. I'll get rid of any of these length and width segments, and then I can just take my texture and put it onto that plane. So if we go to our material editor, and all I need to do is to come into the maps for that material, drag and drop that into the opacity, and then come into this opacity and change the output to be alpha rather than RGB intensity. Okay, so I'll convert that to an editable poly and then put some swift loops in. So if I just swift loop that, and then I can detach this piece. So detach, one in there, and detach. And then I'll just come to my top view, and I'll just put, just so it's a bit easier to work with these, I'll just put the pivot points somewhere down to the bottom. So just come into the hierarchy, effect pivot only, and move those pivot points to there. Okay, I'll just move those off so they're out of the way, and then grab one of these, put that into the centre of my grid, rotate that by about 90 degrees. Okay, so now I just want to add a little bit of shape to this. So if I put in a swift loop there, and then I could maybe just move that a little bit so that it's a bit rounded, and I might just cut up to here as well, and up to here. And then I can move these verts a bit and get a bit more shape like that. So because we're going to scatter so much of this grass around, it is quite important to make sure that you don't add too many verts to this. So you could add a loop through the middle, it just really depends. But the more you add, you know, they're going to add up quickly when we start to scatter thousands of these around on the floor. So I'll maybe do one like that, and I just want to arrange these into little sort of pieces, into little clumps. So this one, yeah, we'll add a little bit more. Rotate that one round a bit. So just scale them up and down a bit and try and make it as random as you can. And then I can use some of these as well. Scale that one down a bit. So just keep on arranging these into a small clump of grass and try not to add too many polys to it. Okay, so this is the result of that, and I've tried to just make sure that it looks kind of okay and fairly full from every angle. So we've got 37 verts in that, which is maybe a bit high, but it obviously depends how we use this in CryEngine. So all I want to do now is just to make sure I attach all of these together into one piece, like that. And I can name this grass 3. And now this is ready to go into CryEngine. So I'll just make sure I reset the X form, and actually I'll just send the pivot back to 0, like that. Collapse that back to an editable poly, and now we can export this. So just add selected, and make sure I've got CryEngine open. Okay, so I just need to make sure I've added selected. I've already saved this file into my CryEngine SDK objects folder. So make sure you save your max file in here, make a new folder for it, then export nodes. Okay, so if we come over to CryEngine now, and we can go into our vegetation painting, add a new object, and where do I put it? In there. So if I just set random rotation on, maybe we could put align to terrain on. I'll leave that on off for now. And what else do we need on? And turn on auto merged as well. And I think that should do for now. So let's just paint a bit of this in. So if you turn on auto merged, what it's going to do is to basically merge all of these things into one large object rather than being loads of small objects, and it will dramatically decrease the draw calls. The downside is that I believe they all will end up being the same scale. They will end up being the same scale, but I don't think there's anything you can do about that, provided auto merged is on. I think if you scale these up and down, it kind of breaks the batching on them. So you can paint some of those in, and then if we open our material editor, let's to just create a new material. So I'll put that in there, grass 3. And then I can just apply this material to the grass in the vegetation tool, so just apply that in. And now I just need to make sure that I put my CryEngine file, so this one, into that folder as well, into there. Okay, so there we go. I'll just take a second to compile that texture. Okay, so that texture's on there now. What we need to do to get rid of the, to kind of put the transparency on, we just need to up this alpha test value. So the higher you put this, the more it's going to kind of snip around the alpha. It really depends on what grass you're making, so I suggest you just play with this until it's about right. I think for this grass, about 25 is going to be right. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to change the shader from this illumination shader to vegetation, just down there. And then we can play with some of our settings. So first of all, the diffuse colour just looks a bit high to me. Sometimes it's a good idea just to tint your grass a bit as well. So actually I think, I mean it obviously depends, but I think this gives it a bit more of a natural colour over here. So I'll just tint that a little like that. Then if we come down to our shader generation parameters, and you can set this to grass or you can set it to leaves. I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between these two, but it seems that the lighting acts slightly differently on each one. I always get better results using leaves rather than grass, but I think the leaves may be more expensive than the grass is. But I'll leave that on leaves for now, and I also want to turn on merged textures as well. We can turn on bending as well, although I don't think the bending will work as long as we've got this auto merged turned on. But what we'll do is we'll paint some other grass to give this a bit of variety and leave that off, and then it'll bend. So we'll leave this on in the shader. Okay, so what else? We can, if you change this back to diffuse colour, what it'll do is it'll allow some of the light to kind of seem as though it's passing through. So again, it's just a case of playing with it until it's about right. For now, I think that's about everything for those settings. So what I'll do is, we've got some of that grass in. I'll just paint a bit more of this in. So if I change the size of this down to about 0.5, then I should be able to paint a bit more grass in. So we can get a really nice thick covering like that. And then because this is just also uniform, because they're all the same sized pieces of grass, what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this layer. So right click and clone object, and then on that cloned object I'm just going to take auto merged off. I'll leave the size to about 1.2 maybe, size variation to about 0.2, and I think that's everything I need to set in there. I'll just change the density to something a bit higher, maybe about 5, and then I can start to paint some of that in. So maybe increase the size a bit more, 1.4. So it's just putting in a few extra pieces that are slightly larger than the other ones, and it'll just add a bit of variety to this. Then if I go back into my material settings, grab that material, And so let's go back into here and just turn on bending to 1 on there. So then you'll get a bit of, some of this will move, some of the taller bits will move, and I actually think you get quite a natural looking result from that. So the movement's maybe a bit too much, so I'll just come into this shader and I will change this frequency down a bit, just so there's a bit less movement, like that. Okay, so this is looking not too bad. I still think I probably need to alter the colour a bit, actually. So I can do that. Still looks a bit bright. It's probably better. But we can definitely improve this further if we now go and create a normal map and spec map for it. So let's do that next. Okay, so back in Photoshop and I've opened up ND2, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete all of those layers. I can delete my alpha channel as well, just to keep things a bit cleaner. Save this and call it your normal map, and then I'm just going to duplicate this a few times so that I've still got some copies of it. And the other thing I'm going to do is I don't need this normal map to be a K, 512 should be enough actually. So just so that ND is a bit faster. In fact, I'll go back, I'll change it to 1024. Oops, 1024. Okay, and then we can just pick one of these and convert it to a normal map. Okay, so what I want to do with this normal map is I want to try and, it's not so much that I want to pick out the individual leaves. What I want to do is to try and get rid of any of this look of these being kind of flat planes. So if we look at them in max, the fact that that's a sort of, just almost a flat plane just with a bit of a bend in it, I really want to hide that as much as I can. So in Photoshop, the best way of doing this would be to model the grass in high poly and then bake a normal map from that. That's obviously going to be really time consuming. So a quick kind of cheat is just to increase your size in ND. Just put the depth right up. And just do that until you get something about like this. Maybe a bit more. Okay, so you can see that what we've got here is there's kind of a block about there, another one about there, another one about there. So just where the colour is bending round. So the light is going to bend round here, or it's going to look as though it's bending round a bit. And this is going to make it look a little bit as though this is kind of one rounded clump there, and there's another rounded clump there, another one there. Obviously this isn't perfect, but, and it's not, technically it's not accurate, but it will just give us enough change on the shape of the lighting to give the effect that that this grass isn't completely in flat planes. So I can just save that now as a CryEngine again. So if I call that grass 3 DDN, and this time I'll save it as a normal map low quality. 512 is fine for this. We don't need an alpha on this either. So just save that. And again I need to put that into this folder. Okay, so just put the normal map into that folder with the rest of everything, and then come back into our material editor, and we can plug that bump map in. Okay. So, sorry, I'll just put that back. The difference here is it's not huge. If I take this normal map off and put it back on, it's kind of subtle, but it is just getting rid of the some of the look of these things being in flat planes. So you can see now it is hard to tell that this grass is built out of a load of flat planes. It does, it looks like it's fairly three-dimensional, and there's a lot of lighting on it, or the lighting's kind of moving around quite a bit. So the other thing that I'm going to do is just come into Photoshop, and I will get another one of these layers, bring that into the normal section, and then convert that as well. Oh, so that's crashed. Okay, so with this layer, I am going to try and pick out a bit of these individual blades of grass. So the size on this looks about right, actually. I can move the depth up a bit if I want. Maybe increase the softness a bit. I don't really want these fine details inside, I just want a bit of the shape of the blades of grass to come through. So maybe try changing that down to the size 3. Okay, that's better. And what I'll do is I'll just set this to be an overlay. So now we've got a bit of both. And this will be my final normal map now, so I'll just again, file, save as, CryEngine, save over that one. Okay. And let's just copy that and paste it into that folder. Okay, so that'll be the normal map setup. Now what we need is a spec map. So I think the way that I'm going to create the spec map is, again, I'm going to use undo. So I'm just going to get rid of this kind of large detail normal map and keep the small detail one. Increase the depth of that, I'll just change the blend back to normal, and just go convert from a normal to a spec. Okay, and with this spec I just want to use it to pick out some of these edges a bit. So this will be okay, like this, and then I will just get so I just want the original diffuse as well. Okay, so if I just put get this diffuse layer as well, and shut down undo now, and paste that in. Obviously that needs to be reduced to the correct size. Like that, and I'll put that above this layer, and I'll just change that to hard light and decrease the opacity on that bit as well. Okay, and I might just put some levels in between that and just try and pop these edges a little bit more. That's be above that. Okay, something like that would be fine. Let's save this as a spec, and then save this as a CryEngine as well. So that can be Grass 3 spec, and this wants to be spec high quality, and let's maybe have this a K as well. I might reduce that to 5 total. I might reduce all of these textures by half. It would kind of depend on the performance in the engine, I guess. I'll come back into CryEngine. I just want to again make sure that I copy that spec into here. Okay. Then in CryEngine, load that spec map in. Right. And obviously we need to increase our spectral colour a bit. So you can see that starting to come through now. And let's increase the gloss until it looks about like grass, just probably about there somewhere. Okay. So now we're getting a nice spec off this. It looks about right, maybe a bit extreme. Turn that down a bit. And then again we can play with this back diffuse colour scale now until we get this right. So we can change these Fresnel settings as well. And really it's just a case of playing with everything until we get something that we're happy with the look of. Okay, that looks about right to me. And there we have our finished grass. So if we drop in. So that's looking okay now. Obviously what we could do is we could basically mess with those settings in the shader quite a bit more just until we get this looking exactly right, but that's looking fairly convincing, and that's it. Okay, so just briefly at the end of this, this is kind of the finished result after I've tweaked it a bit and messed around with it. I've also added in a slightly kind of darker version of the grass, or kind of a more brown version of the grass, as though it's a bit starting to die and dry out. So yeah, I think the only thing that I would want to change about this now is there's some of these bits of the kind of darker, there's these dark tips here that just seem to sort of stand out and look a bit odd. So I'd probably go and just remove those from the diffuse texture completely. Just find which the sort of culprit that is that dark bit there, and then just get rid of those. other than that, I think that's looking pretty good. The spec on it looks about right to me, and the normal map's working well. So we really can't see that this is built out of just some simple planes. Yeah, and it's quite nice, thick, dense grass as well, and it's not too bad on performance. Although it is obviously, this is fairly expensive, but we've still got a pretty good frame rate on this. Okay, so that's the grass finished.